If CEOs had a stat sheet, what do you think the stats would be?
Uh, Charisma.
Welcome to Context Club, a weekly-ish podcast where we uncover all the clues, context, and continuity surrounding your favorite mediums, from video games to comic books, shows, and movies. We're here digging up all the dirt, giving you all the information so you can know even more about some of your favorite things. With me, as always, we got Mike Williams in the house. What's up, dude?
Hey, how you doing, Evan? I'm
Pretty
doing
good.
pretty well. It's a nice, beautiful, as we're recording this Tuesday evening. Um, I don't know what the evening is like. We have passed into April, and new things are happening because, of course, April is the beginning of another quarter for businesses, which is why we're going to talk about business stuff.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Sony and PlayStation today. We didn't have a big show announcement. There's no big crossovers happening right now in terms of movies or games. Things have been a little bit shaky, I think, in the world of games this year alone, with, just tons and tons of layoffs kind of hitting the headlines in this first couple of months. We've already caught up to last year. We're like maybe 1,000 or 2,000 short in terms of game developer or industry layoffs. For the total of last year was like around 10,000. Now we're about up to 8,000. I think last time I checked, it's got to be a little higher now. And we'll get into that later. But mostly today we're going to talk about PlayStation. Why? Just because we like talking about this stuff. And I think there's been an interesting development where we've officially exited the era of Jim Ryan, right?
Yeah, so Jim Ryan is gone. He took over as president in 2017, president and CEO for Sony Interactive Entertainment, and he took over in 2019, and he is leaving on April 1st of 2024. So a decent 5 years. He had a lengthy career with Sony on the Europe side, and he was fine. He was
Yeah,
Jim Ryan. He
I
was
will
okay.
say, I will come out hot with saying, or like with a hot take, I guess. Maybe it's not that hot. But the Jim Ryan era of PlayStation, personally, and I've said this to other friends, is my least favorite PlayStation era so far, by probably a
Really?
long shot. Yeah.
You're
And
not a fan of the PS5?
it's not just the PS5, because the way I see it, right? The PS5 was coming whether or not Jim Ryan was in the chair or not, right? PS5 was coming no matter what. In terms of his legacy, and like what he contributed, I think a lot of it, maybe unfairly, is kind of behind the scenes, right? Like a lot of CEO work that gets done. It's a lot of shaking hands. It's a lot of making deals, making sure like the wheels are greased for business to happen on a very large scale. So probably, handling the relationships between, other major companies and manufacturers, right? We don't really talk about like where the factories and stuff where these products are made and come from, but part of a CEO's job is likely making sure that all of those negotiations and things are good, right? And then overseeing the business. And then you have got the creative side, the content side, right? Where they got to make sure that stuff's all going to hit like it's supposed to. And in this era alone, and I know Jim Ryan already, we're going to get into the story in a second, is kind of out, has exited, right? But in terms of what I think about Jim Ryan's legacy, and maybe you can correct me or like, inform me a little bit more. But my view of it is like he came in and was really, he ushered in the transition for the PlayStation 5, which I think was okay. Like it's fairly strong. It's a good console, but that probably was going to happen with or without him. I think they could have been a little stronger on the messaging. But my big like thing for him is like the big thing that he did was he really made like PlayStation exclusives happen on PC, right? He was the one who kind of ushered us in my opinion.
Yeah.
Under his leadership, this is what we saw, right? This is kind of the big shift in terms of PlayStation's business model. And then other than that, he also raised the price of the console mid generation, right? Which is something we haven't seen on the PlayStation side, Xbox or Nintendo, really. But yeah, those are like the two big things that I think about like Jim Ryan's reign. But maybe there's some more positives in there you can throw in.
Overall, from his reign, like there is the slow addition of some PC stuff. There is the move towards live service, so there were a lot of acquisitions and stuff like
Yes.
that. And some of that stuff hasn't paid off yet, but occasionally some of those acquisitions do hit pay dirt. In the case of Helldivers 2 for
Yeah.
Arrowhead, which also dovetails with that PC side release. Like, okay, we're releasing games on PC as well. And the PS5, I mean, they're definitely hitting like a not a wall. I think there's always room for better technology, and we'll talk about it later. But like,
Yeah.
there comes a point where it feels like we can make stronger machines now, but it's going to cost developers way more to make games for that, and we're hitting that ceiling for developers, at which point they have to pull back, at which point the extra power isn't as meaningful.
Yeah. So, I mean, just kind of focusing on where we're at now with the PlayStation 5 and like kind of the span of Jim Ryan, the former CEO at PlayStation. Um, like I mean, isn't it convenient that he just now happens to be gone just before they announced that they're not going to have any sequels to their major franchises for a whole year and change, right? And just as they kind of announced like a ton of layoffs and stuff, like his exit, it's just like, for me, it's frustrating because we see kind of Jim Ryan, he comes in, he hits the kind of break glass in case of emergency button, which is what I think of as like bringing your console exclusives to PC. Like, don't get me wrong, I think that's great for consumers and it's good. As like for the PlayStation business, I think that a lot of people could argue like, oh, it's not great. Obviously, they're going to make a ton of money every time they release something on PC, but that was definitely, you know, something people would be critical of in the past, largely with like Nintendo bringing games over to like mobile, right? And it was a criticism of like PlayStation, Xbox as well when we started getting like day and date PC ports on Xbox. And then when PlayStation did it, there was a little bit of a stink, but people have kind of now kind of gotten used to it. And the way that PlayStation does it is they kind of smooth it over, right? By waiting a
With
year.
the gap.
Yeah,
Yeah,
with the
you
gap.
get the year gap.
Yeah. So, and I think like that's all pretty smart business in terms of like a business leader kind of orchestrating that transition and to get it in there. But now I think it's left PlayStation in a really weird spot. Like we're looking at a whole year without any sequels to like major franchises, which was the game plan, right? For like PlayStation has basically built a section of this industry that relies on these kind of AAA gaming experiences that are kind of exclusives in the console space at least. And you gotta deliver on those. Your job, if you're gonna do that, you're gonna bet big on big AAA games. You gotta release games, and so to go a year without one of those, and albeit there could be an announcement later this year, maybe PlayStation has something big. It doesn't feel likely, but yeah, it's just like when I think about Jim Ryan's participation, and I think there's like some of the good things, but some of the good things he did, I feel like pretty much anybody could have done. And by the time he's out, it feels like PlayStation is left on a back foot. And if you want to add something real quick, then I'll get into the story.
Which era so the going over the major eras, we got Ken Kutaragi,
Yeah,
the father of the PlayStation.
sure.
He kicks everything off, and he goes until 2007. Then you got Kaz Hirai from 2007 to 2011. Andrew House, who I vaguely remember from 2011 to 2017. John Codera, who I completely forgot. I honestly completely forgot that this guy existed. Tsuyoshi Codera was his Japanese name. And then we got Jim Ryan. And I'd say the last three were pretty cool. I mean, Kaz Hirai rose to be like the top of Sony all told. So it's worth noting that there
hard
is,
not to go that way. Yeah, hard not to say like this is the dude who really gets it. Yeah.
It's worth noting that there is Sony at the top, and then what we're mostly talking about is Sony Interactive Entertainment, which used to be two different divisions, Sony Computer
Yeah.
Entertainment and Sony Entertainment Network International. So SIE is the current, like, that is the division that houses PlayStation. Um, I mean, I guess people are very much fans of Kaz Hirai. He was still a,
Yeah.
like,
Like if
Ken,
you ever
Ken
the Ridge
Kutaragi
Racer
was
clip
what.
and stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah,
That's all that.
Ken Kutaragi was one of those old schoolers. Like, he was an actual engineer. Kaz Hirai was a business guy, and I think ever since then they've just had business guys.
Well, I think I do. So it's hard not to bet or not to root for, the PlayStation 2 era where we had, this is still the best selling console of all time, basically, not counting mobile. And did the 3DS ever catch up? Like, I feel like handhelds got real close, right? At some
Uh,
point.
yeah, handhelds are
Yeah.
pretty high, and
Yeah.
the Nintendo Switch. That was one of the fun things that Jim Ryan came out and said the Switch was getting real close to eclipsing the all time record, and Jim Ryan was like, actually, the number is slightly different.
Yeah, that was
Um,
kind of interesting. Yeah.
sure. I admit that I'm not particularly excited by the Jim Ryan era,
Well,
but he has succeeded partially due to the context around. Like, Xbox has definitely not brought. Nintendo is off doing its own thing,
yeah, sure.
and Xbox has not brought that same level of competition. And it shows in the sales and the fact that like, even Microsoft hasn't even talked about Xbox Series S and X sales
Yeah.
for a long time. So,
Yeah.
like, they've purchased a bunch of companies, but they haven't really gotten everyone in line and got their marching orders going.
Yeah.
Whereas, at the very least, and again, there is a PlayStation Worldwide Studios guy who is supposed to be taking care of all of these studios and getting them in line. So maybe you can't put that
Sure, like
on
your
Jim
Sean
Ryan.
Layden's and your Jack Trentons and your
Herman Hulst is the
Herman
current
Hulse,
one
yeah.
now. Yeah, who
Is
used to
current,
be
yeah.
at Gorilla.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that make sure, like, that the games come out. And Xbox is Matt Booty, I believe.
Yeah, they just had a pretty big shift. So
He
Aaron
just
is up
changed.
there and Matt Booty's up there and Sarah Bond also the new like president of Xbox proper and then Phil Spencer is now like Microsoft gaming president. I think that's right. I think
Yeah,
that's
and they haven't really, like, they have the resources, but they haven't whipped them into a shape. Whereas Sony, over the course of the PS4, so leading into Ryan's tenure, like, Sony figured it out. Like, they got
yeah.
Insomniac on point.
Yeah.
They got, Naughty Dog on point. You got even
Even
Sucker Punch found
Sucker Punch, yeah.
Ghost of Tsushima. Their only real probably misstep is Sony Bend, which was always a smaller studio, and even then, Days Gone didn't. When we
It did
finally
do
got from
poorly.
the
Yeah.
from the Insomniac leak, we got numbers. Days Gone didn't do that poorly. It didn't do as well as the top end, the Gods of War, the Spider-Mans, Ghost of Tsushima, but it did okay. Like, it did pretty well for a new IP.
And the sequel probably would have done even better. Like
Right.
it just probably didn't hit the benchmarks for them to pull the trigger on a sequel, but I think like there is an audience for that game. People do like that game.
And Sony also has, they've picked up the Returnal studio, Housemarque. They
Yeah.
picked up
Bungie.
Bungie. Bungie is weird because Bungie has such independence that it is sort of just out there doing whatever it wants with Destiny, and it's currently not really working, from I've heard from my Destiny playing friends.
Sure.
But, like Arrow with Helldivers, that's a hit. Returnal did good. They have a bunch of stuff that they need to see if it works out, and they also have their projects where they are reaching out, like the China Hero Project and the Indian Hero. They just announced the India Hero Project,
Okay.
where they're reaching out to other regions that are making games and saying, how can we help you reach a bigger audience? And at the same time, what that does is sort of tie those developers as they're growing to PlayStation. I think because they looked at things like MiHoYo and other studios that they're, like Chinese developers or any Korean developers out there, and they were like, we should reach out and like establish a foothold in those regions
Well, the dollar
as a power.
signs are there, absolutely, right? And we're going to talk about this as well, like in terms of where gaming goes from here in general and that market space. But I do want to revisit, you kind of brought up the PlayStation 4 era, and I think about the messaging around things like the China Hero Project and the India Hero Project. Like, you don't really hear about this stuff. Like, it doesn't feel like it's being championed. And obviously now without a CEO proper, right? You've got like a business dude, Hiroki Totoki, essentially kind of calling the shots now for PlayStation overall. And like Herman Hulse is probably busy trying to put out.
And we will say that he
But
is
yeah.
he is officially an interim CEO. He is
Yes,
not the next CEO.
right,
They are still looking for the next person.
right, exactly. And so what's going on is I feel like during that PlayStation 4 era where we had, oh gosh, there was like just the messaging around like supporting indie games and stuff. We hadn't seen anything like it. Like I just remember there was one E3 where they did a showcase, and gosh, I think it was Adam. What's his last name? I'm forgetting, but it was Adam was up on stage, and then they had like this
Adam
huge
Boys. Yeah.
Adam Boys, right? Had this huge presentation for like 4, 5, 6 indie games. Main stage E3 was like, oh man, indies like never get this kind of treatment, and we've never really seen them get that kind of treatment again, outside of being part of State of Plays, right? The digital versions, and Xbox I think does support their indies sometimes, depending on which one it is and depending on the time of year and stuff like that. But I mean, again, that era was like at the launch of the PlayStation 4, they were trying to build up interest where there wasn't a lot of like AAA games right at the front, like right at the front of the gate at the start. So, and then I think about just Jim Ryan trying to string together sentences, like just having quotes that just aren't just completely confusing and frustrating outside of the like these big produced presentations where they can like edit his stuff together or he has a script to work on. He's just somebody who I feel like was like constantly putting his foot in his mouth in terms of the direction of PlayStation. Like he had one quote that was like, "Who wants to play old retro games?" or something like that, and it's like, dude, like do you know who your audience is? Have you played games before? Like it seemed out of touch, especially when you compare it to someone like a Phil Spencer who like obviously clearly has his own issues, right? But like as a face of a company is like swings pretty hard, and like you wouldn't want to see those two in a debate because it would be just like a massacre,
Yeah,
right?
because Ryan is definitely like I said, like he's a corporate guy.
Yeah.
He's there to steer the ship and not really be the one to talk amongst the people. And I mean, Phil Spencer can talk to the people, but at the end of the day, I would say Xbox is not doing as well as PlayStation.
Yeah, third place,
And
right? That's what they say. Third place.
yeah, and Sony is doing some smart things, like Rise of the Ronin, which is Tecmo Koei, giving them a little resources that's published through Sony Interactive Entertainment. You got Stellar Blade coming up, which is from the studio Shift Up that does Nike Goddess of Victory. That's being published through Sony Interactive. So they're like either picking up some of these smaller studios like Arrow or Housemark, or they're saying, we think you're almost there.
Hmm.
What can we do to help you like get that last yard? Like maybe this is your time to blow up. Like Rise of the Ronin definitely feels like we're this is going to fill a place in our release schedule for the year, and give you a chance to sort of grow up. Koei Tecmo, you've been doing great with some other games. You got Neo 2, Wild Hearts was another one. It's
Hmm.
like, here's your chance to, with us behind you, sort of do a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think that stuff is really, really cool. But then, and that's stuff that takes a long time in the making, those relationships and those partnerships, and then you're funding these companies, and you're kind of like, checking in the oven, like you check on these teams every once in a while to see how things are good, cooking. And it sounds like some of these games are pretty good. Like I think there was a pretty strong showing for Wild Hearts when it seemed that its face, it was like a Monster Hunter kind of a clone, but then people are like, oh, there's like actually something here, something to this, and people did enjoy that stuff. And then on the other hand, though, you've got like Sony like putting their foot in to the Activision Blizzard and Microsoft merger, where that just went terribly for them, where they put a lot of energy in there. And Jim Ryan saying like this is gonna destroy the business, this is very bad for the games industry, and then being revealed later in emails where he said like actually like this is fine, we don't really care about it. And like that alone, just having like your front man who was like kind of spearheading this charge of like we have to stop this merger, one of the biggest video game acquisitions in the history in all time, and then just to be like on the flip into that, like just clearly being shown to be kind of lying. I think like on its face is pretty much a lie, right? Like he spun it in a weird way.
Yeah, I think that was very much a we're not worried about you, but we want to make sure that you do stay at the bottom. Like we're like we are definitely at the top, and we don't think you're going to catch us anytime soon.
Yeah.
But if you might, we need to cut that off at the knees.
Sure. So, but yeah, that's, I think, yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that. But those are the kind of 3 or 4 major things I think about when I think about Jim Ryan. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, he was fine. He leaves the PlayStation 5 has sold 54.7 million units.
Yeah, there it is.
Which was like a little short from Sony's estimate, but still quite good.
Considering COVID as well, right? Like they did usher that thing.
And considering
COVID.
people don't have money, this is still like a very expensive console.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, like it's still a very expensive console, and Totoki has been sort of vaguely in the role. Like he fully took over on April 1st, but he's sort of vaguely been in the role, and he set forward quotes at Sony's last financial earnings release for the third quarter of financial 2023. And one thing he acknowledged is that like the price hasn't really come down because the price hasn't really come down for Sony. Like, and his quote is, when it comes to PS5, one challenge that sets this console cycle apart from PS4 and previous generations is that we find it difficult to reduce our costs during the course of the cycle. Unlike high-spec PCs, PS consoles enable us to offer an immersive experience for many people in a safe environment with an affordable price. To offer that kind of experience with costs for components like chips and memory on the rise, one key will be that we continue to sell consoles without substantial discount by engaging in product planning that ensures affordability for consumers. So part of the issue here is the chips and everything that are going into a PS4 are also being used for other things. So Sony has to compete for those chips, especially as you go for the more cutting edge hardware chips with smaller die sizes and stuff like that. Like this is part of Nintendo being able to go over here and do their own thing.
Yeah.
Is that no one else, like, they're like, oh, we're going to use some chips that are like a generation back, 2 generation backs. Nobody else really needs those. So it's probably easier for Nintendo to say, we just want a whole bunch of these. Whereas once you start getting up to more modern technology, not only is it expensive, but then you're competing with, everybody else who might use those chips, including the people like the PlayStation 5 stuff. It's semi-custom AMD stuff.
Yeah.
And AMD has to sell its own chips. AMD has to sell enterprise stuff, which is slightly different architecture. It has to sell now AI stuff because NVIDIA is like bursting ahead on AI server stuff, and AMD wants a lot of that money as well. So, like, it's not cheaper for Sony to make the PS5, so they haven't lowered the price. And since they can't lower the price, the audience, like Sony said that they're going to have declines sales declines in unit sales because people just can't buy a PS5. That's like let's be entirely honest. Uh, Inflation is hitting everything. We got mass layoffs. Groceries cost entirely too much.
Yeah, sure.
Gas goes up. Uh, Folks just don't have money for a PS5, even or CS Series X, or God forbid, high. Even a mid-range PC is super expensive now. Like a mid-range card used to be $200. A mid-range card now is like 800, like 750, $800. So like people just can't afford it, and that's part of the issue. Like it's consumers can't afford this high spec hardware. Uh, Sony can't afford to give any discounts on it because the costs aren't coming down, and developers and publishers can't really afford to make games for it because they cost so much. Uh,
It's bleak when you line it all up in a list order like that. Yeah. Gosh.
yeah, so like Totoki noticed, like, yeah, prices aren't coming down. And at that same investors call, he said another driver is going to be first party titles. Quote, strong titles that achieve growth on PS5, PCs, and other platforms will widen our margins. We believe that we have opportunities for margin improvement and intend to pursue them aggressively. And part of that is selling. He even lists PCs in there, where you're going to start seeing more of those PC games. Remasters, probably, stuff like that. Uh, Getting more money out of the same stone.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, like we have even more Totoki quotes that were collected in this VGC article written by Chris Scullion. The headline, of course, Sony President Hiroki Totoki officially begins his role as interim CEO of PlayStation. That started on April 1st, so just 2 days ago. And it said, let's see, there was a statement earlier where it said, there was a representative from PlayStation who said, Mr. Totoki will work closely with Sony Group Corporation Chairman and CEO Kenichiro Yoshida and the management team of SIE to help define the next chapter of PlayStation's future, including the succession of SIE CEO role. So that's the role that Jim Ryan just left. While I'm looking at these other quotes, do you have any guesses on who you think they'll just pull Herman Holst up from Worldwide Studios, like from managing the PlayStation Studios to be CEO? Do you think they pull in another business person? There was a lot of falling out the last time this happened, right? We basically lost, it wasn't Jack Tretton, but it was Sean Layden, right? Who was kind of the World Studios person at that time, I believe. And then when Jim Ryan came in, Layden was out. Like they didn't keep him. And then it was a while before Herman Holst came in. So do you think we'll see another shakeup? Do you have any idea who you think they might pull in?
I think Herman Hulse might stay where he is. Like he gets paid pretty well. He was already a studio head over at Gorilla. I don't know if he wants to run PlayStation as a whole. I think probably they'll make a sideways pull from some other, business side of Sony, um, and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that kind of makes sense too. It definitely does seem to be a pull within Sony, like the larger corporation, where it's always kind of been like, well, PlayStations are like as a device are something we can use to sell TVs, but I think PlayStation as a brand now has grown so much that it's kind of its own individual thing, and like a strong moneymaker for Sony now. Like it's become more than something that will help them sell other Sony products. So it's interesting to see. And then when I think a company takes interest in something like that, they're more likely to put the business-minded folks in charge of things. And we'll get into this in a second. But the kind of the first thing we saw, like even before April 1st, was when Totoki came in, he started talking about how he wanted to be more aggressive. There's this quote from the VGC story that says, Totoki said he wants Sony to be aggressive when it comes to improving its gaming division's profit margins, which he says can partly be achieved with a greater focus on bringing first-party games to PC. That's very similar to kind of the other quote we pulled. This is from the same Q&A session that we had over here. This is basically the transcript where the Q&A is what we're looking at here. And here's the other quote. But basically saying, there's these different tactics they're going to use. it doesn't seem to be, the tactic doesn't seem to be, we're just going to make really great games, like a great product that people want. We're kind of trying to use anything at our disposal to make things cheaper and also to port things over, right, to other platforms where we can sell it again, right? It's like very like kind of business mind and business focus. And also, I should add to that Sony is a little bit quieter about their plans generally. They're not like, we're going all into AI. They never really announce what they're doing that often before what they do. There'll maybe be a PlayStation 6, for example, but they're not going to officially confirm it or what's in it till like right out just before it comes. Maybe
Yeah,
like
until they're ready to talk about it. Yeah. They're usually pretty quiet. And I mean, it helps for Totoki at least, depending on how long he stays, that he's like, we're going to lean heavy into, he's going to continue the live service thing. We're going to lean heavy into releasing stuff on PC. And then Helldivers hits like a month before. And he can literally, and you even have the screenshot there
Yes.
of the article on Helldivers. It's like, he can just point to Helldivers and be like, do you like money? I like money. It's like Helldivers 2 is still one of the top Steam sellers, and it's probably selling just as well on PlayStation 5. And
yeah,
it's hard to, like, you can take the lumps on the fans having issues with their exclusives coming to PC any closer than a year. You can take those lumps if you can go back to the shareholders and go, I mean, but we made a shit ton of money.
Yeah. I think that's the thing with Xbox as well, even bringing their exclusives over to PlayStation, where it's like, no, they're going to make a ton of money when they do this. And whether that's good or bad for like the Xbox brand as we know it isn't really a part of the conversation for them, because they're like, no, we can just use this money to make more, like to bolster the brand up in different ways, right? So I don't know if we'll ever see PlayStation games come to Xbox. In this article, it says Totoki made it clear that he feels releasing games multi-platform, which he seemingly clarified as meaning PC, continues to be the way forward. And then he also said, I personally think there are opportunities out there for improvement of margin. So I'd like to go aggressive on improving our margin performance. And during the same call, Totoki said Bungie could be better at assuming, well, we'll get into the Bungie stuff in a second, but Bungie could be better at assuming responsibility for its development timelines, which is wild. But in terms of improving margin performance, I mean, we just saw 900 layoffs, like shortly after this Q&A, 900 layoffs at Sony affecting two of their biggest AAA studios, Naughty Dog and Insomniac, right? Studios you would think are completely untouchable. But we were talking a little bit before the show, but like that is the best way. Best is a really bad way to frame it, but that is the quickest way to improve your margins, right?
It is a terrible way to do it if you care about people, and also like you're losing of those 900. Like it wasn't just like, and even the lower rung employees matter too, but at those you're losing veterans as well, and the veterans lead to a certain amount of brain drain. So you're losing talent that can be used to create further games that will make you further revenue that will then justify those people's salaries, and to cut them just to sort of find some extra change under the couch cushions just feels off.
Yeah, as especially as like a go-to strategy. And another thing of note is we saw this happen to the Western studios, and I believe also Firestorm as well, which I think is based in Europe.
Firesprite.
Right? Firesprite, sorry. I always call it Firestorm. That's that other thing, I think. But yeah, so I think there are rules in place in other countries where you're not allowed to do this, right, as a way to like bolster your company. Specifically in Japan is kind of my understanding, where there's like special rules in place where you can't just lay off a bunch of people to like make line go up. But in the West, we don't have that, because the large part of the market here and capitalism and the way things work is this is not an accepted, but a commonplace strategy for executives and CEOs to make that line go up, to improve those margins. You just lay off a bunch of people because that goes into your costs, right? And revenue go up. But it's not really revenue go up. It's more like weird, like intentional bloodletting, right? It's like you're, yeah, go ahead.
You also lose new projects. So like if you look back on some of the other layoffs, like Ubisoft did a bunch of layoffs, and then
Mm.
they said the studios that are still here, we're gonna need you to all kick in on getting Assassin's Creed up to snuff.
Sure.
Um, and you can see it with even over in movies. Disney lays off a bunch of people and then says, "Hey, Pixar, we're gonna need you to get on Toy Story 6."
Hmm.
Marvel, maybe you just need to focus on the sure hits, like stuff like that, where you do the layoffs and then you get rid of potential products and games that can grow your overall market. And like, I'm sure they probably canceled some other interesting game projects within, Insomniac or Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog or whatever.
Yeah, it seems like
Naughty
the
Dog openly canceled The Last of Us multiplayer after that entered development hell. We found out from the Insomniac leak that even before the layoffs, way before, there was a Spider-Man multiplayer game that also got canceled. Which, hey, those games may not have turned out to be anything worthwhile. But the fact is, you kill them and then you go back to what works. And the problem is you can only mine what works for so long before the fields start to go fallow.
yeah, absolutely. And I forgot to mention Gorilla got hit by this too. Gosh, where is Gorilla? Do you remember? It's not Sweden. It is, where's
It's where
Gorilla?
Hulse from.
Yes. Creative support teams. I will read the headline of this just to give credit to Wesley LeBlanc over there at Game Informer. Shout out to Game Informer. Go subscribe. You can now get subscriptions directly from Game Informer without going through
Dutch. It's
GameStop.
Danish and
There-
Amsterdam.
Amsterdam.
Haha.
Okay. There it is. So PlayStation laying off 900 across Insomniac, Naughty Dog, Gorilla, and more, closing London studio. So there you have it right there. There's one studio that's being closed. There's probably other smaller ones. We saw this with the Activision layoffs too, the Microsoft Activision layoffs, where like Toys for Bob basically took a huge hit, and then we thought it was going to get shuttered, but they were able to like pull themselves out. But like this is how it goes. There's usually layoffs, and then whoever's left either gets redistributed, studios get shut down, projects get canceled. Mike, you pulled the two big ones, the Spider-Man game and the Last of Us game. Probably these are live service games that the bets didn't seem like they were going to pay off, right? Like the Sony and part of what we talked about Jim Ryan's legacy was to kind of go all in on games as service, kind of go in on multiplayer. They're looking at these long-term games, I think, that are always at the top of Steam, that are just printing money basically, and things like Roblox, right? Games as service games like Call of Duty. I guess I would bring up like League of Legends in there, and even maybe like Apex Legends to a lesser extent. But you're looking at these games where it's like a singular game. It's amount of resources are kind of like upfront costs, right, on the major development, and then you're kind of maintaining it, and then the microtransactions and the battle passes and stuff, the way it's supposed to work, those things just print money, right? So if you put a bunch of those irons in the fire, right, doesn't that just mean you're gonna print so much money, Mike? Like you just have
And
every game is a live service game.
and that's
Like,
part
what
of
could
the
go wrong?
problem is that it feels like they have too many live service games in
Yeah,
development. Like, okay, you got Bungie doing Marathon. You had Fire Sprite doing another one. You have, well, you just killed the Last of Us one.
mm-hmm.
You also have Haven Studios doing Fair Games.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm going to be honest, like, sure, it could work, but probably not.
We've seen a
Like,
lot of these fail, right? We've seen there was the
and they're
Splatoon
not
one.
bad.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a lot of them, like we've seen a lot of them fail, and it's not even like they're bad.
Mm.
Like some of them were solid games. It's just you couldn't patch the holes. You couldn't like in terms of like I play Fortnite every night. Like that is my daily driver game.
Yeah, how could
Um,
I?
I,
Oh,
I
yeah.
I I hit my dailies, and you need to do a lot to get me off of Fortnite. Like, if you want to be the replacement Fortnite, you need to do a lot. If you want to be the replacement, like play Final Fantasy 14 as my MMO, you have to do a lot. And that is a hard sell. And with, Genshin
Yeah.
and Fortnite and Call of Duty Warzone, like people are I was about to say trapped within those ecosystems
It
by the stuff,
certainly feels that way sometimes.
right? By the stuff that they've already played to unlock or purchased. So you need to be amazing to get over that. And even if it's good, I just don't see fair games like knocking it out of the park. And I feel sorry for the folks working on that. Concord is also supposed to be a PvP multiplayer FPS. Um, and that's like that list that you're showing there says that's coming in 2024. We haven't even seen anything really of that.
Mhm.
Like, we got one teaser trailer that did not give us a shape for that. And
Yeah.
so, like, you got Marathon, Concord, and Fair Games. Yes, you might try to do all three of those in order to find a hit, but isn't it just better to do one of those
Mm.
and then let the other two sort of focus on something else? I don't know.
I mean, if you're Sony and you don't think like the Spider-Man IP can support a live service game or the Last of Us IP can support a live service game, like what chance does Fair Games have, right? Like what chance does is any other unknown like games as service have? Like it's wild. Like the finals, reportedly a very good game. I really wanted to play it, but I didn't get a chance. But a game I know people enjoy quite a bit. But like even that has trouble breaking through. And the fact that Helldivers did is still kind of lightning in a bottle, right? I think that publishers and stuff can chase that lightning, but to strike it seems impossibly hard, right?
Yeah, and I mean, and the Helldivers also is doing it not so much in a, like, it's slightly different. Like, it is not just an extraction game. It is not just a PvP like Counter-Strike shooter or Valorant style shooter. It is a, co-op, PvE kind of experience. Like, it is a specific type of live service that is slightly different. And like, if the market leader is suffering, maybe you can take some of that. Like, Marvel, some studio just announced Marvel Rivals, which
Yes,
is
the
like
it's like an Overwatch clone.
Overwatch,
Yeah,
Overwatch clone with Marvel characters.
yeah,
And to be honest, Overwatch 2 is struggling. It's on the struggle. So
sure.
I can see the business side of that,
Yeah,
like I can see that clawing some sort of success because it's Marvel. Hey, you already know all these characters. Do you like these characters? Come play this game. And Overwatch is dying. So there's space. But
sure.
Warzone isn't dying.
Mm.
Genshin Impact is not struggling. Fortnite is
Fortnite, yeah.
not dying. In fact, Fortnite is expanding. Like, Fortnite is putting other games inside of Fortnite to get people to play. Like, I probably would not have touched Rocket Racing except for the fact that it's already inside of Fortnite. So
Yeah.
there are ways to go and get that live service dollar. Like, Ghost of Tsushima had Legends. I loved Legends.
Hmm.
Um,
It's very good, yeah.
and I understand that the developer was probably not interested in pushing that forward. And I'm also like perfectly good with that. But doing stuff like Legends is probably the better way to sort of juice that live service.
I think we've seen a little bit of that too with the roguelite additions to basically like I'm sure we'll see this with Spider-Man 2 as well, but like a roguelite DLC for God of War Ragnarok and for Last of Us and I think for Last of Us Part 2. So I think there is that. But then when it comes to like these kind of bespoke projects and stuff where Sony's trying to get in the door, it just seems like such a departure from the strategy that they already kind of knows what works. And I understand why you would switch from like a AAA model of like, we're just going to build the biggest, splashiest games you've ever seen, like high risk, high reward. Like I understand that. But to kind of like, and maybe that's why we got the closure of these other multiplayer games, right? Where maybe it was taking time away from Naughty Dog, and Insomniac's kind of focuses on these large AAA. There was also a Horizon multiplayer game supposed to happen too, right?
I think that the Horizon one might still be happening.
Still be on.
Because it is not. I don't think Guerrilla is doing it directly. I think another studio is doing it with Guerrilla's IP. And Naughty Dog openly said, yeah, the amount of resources it would take to sort of keep this alive and keep it working, keep it great, we just didn't feel like we would rather put those resources towards another single player thing. Mm-hmm. And I believe there might have been a mention in the Insomniac leak about that for Spider-Man as well, in that they were just like, hey, we can do this and we could probably make it work, but it would also, like, we are not multiplayer people, and to keep this alive would require X amount of resources that we could just use on another single player game.
Yeah. So here it is, just to clarify. Yeah, Jason Schreier, gaming insider, who breaks a lot of news. Someone asked back in February, did they also cancel Horizon Online at Guerrilla? Jason Schreier said no. So there's that. And it is an interesting conversation, I think, that we can't really have without also discussing Bungie. But I do want to shout out Jake Green for putting this list together over on Tech Radar that we've kind of been using here. Thank you, Jake, for putting this information all in one place. I love when a gaming article is just a list sometimes. Like, I go back to them frequently to like double check stuff. But that's good. But you know, in that Q&A we were talking about, where Hiroki Totoki was kind of talking about the future of PlayStation, and basically that Q&A is for investors, right, of PlayStation, of Sony, trying to say like, hey, don't worry, the money's okay. We're going to make money. It's going to be fine. Everybody's cool. So in that, he addresses the kind of the situation with Bungie, particularly where, you know, we had mentioned this before, where he said Bungie could be better at assuming responsibility for its development timelines. Basically kind of, I don't know if it's throwing them under the bus, if like technically they are really taking too long for some of this content expansions and stuff. But at the same time, game development is really hard. To do it right, to hit it out of the park is really hard. And with these live service games, like, I try to think about the fans and the audience from these communities, and it could be just because of the way that reporting works and the way that online discourse works. But a lot of these communities, it feels really hard to keep them happy, right? Like, there always seems to be something that's frustrating, particularly in the Destiny community. That last DLC didn't really hit the mark for a lot of folks. There's a lot of other issues people were having, which is probably worth its own kind of podcast to dive in there. And people who are like deep into Destiny could probably explain that a lot better than you or I, Mike. But again, those layouts kind of came off of Totoki saying, I visited the Bungie studios and had meetings with the management, he said, and I saw that employees working at the studio were highly motivated, showing great creativity, as well as impressive knowledge of live services. However, I also felt that there was room for improvement from a business perspective with regard to areas such as the use of business expenses and assuming accountability for development timelines. I hope to continue the dialogue and come up with some good solutions. Now, Bungie is a company that's had a lot of autonomy, and when they entered this deal with PlayStation, they did manage to retain a lot of that autonomy unless they don't hit specific benchmarks, at which point Sony can kind of swoop in and take a little bit more control. And at the same time, I want to say, like, Bungie is probably as much crap as like Destiny 2 get for their kind of approach to content and their ability to produce good content. They are one of the best in the business at doing this, right? It's why Sony bought them, so that they could help advise on all of their other live service projects. So it's kind of hard for me or frustrating for me to see like a business oriented individual who's like, nah, we got to tighten the ship up in here. We're going to clean some of this stuff out. Timelines got to be like a little more rigid and like just work faster basically, or work, like we're just make it so, right? Is kind of the impression I get from this. Again, this is just a quote from a Q&A. It's not like incredibly detailed in terms of what that all means. But if I was working at Bungie, I'd be a little stressed. You're muted, buddy.
Yep, yep. I mean, Bungie is like, it feels like they're sort of betting on what is coming next. So the Final Shape and Marathon are the ones that are getting the juice. And Final Shape got delayed, so they can work on it, of course, some more. And they got to make sure Marathon comes out the door. And yeah, I mean, it's an extraction shooter. Like, is that exciting? For I know someone working on that game, and I'm just like, in my head, I'm just like, sure, like maybe like it's Bungie for one, and sure, the art aesthetic of the trailer looks fantastic,
Oh yeah.
but one, that isn't really particularly what I want from a thing called Marathon. Which, if people didn't know, Marathon was an older series of FPS games from Bungie during their Apple days, and those are very story-heavy games. So they've just sort of taken the name, and that's fine. I mean, things like that happen. I'm not like going to get too angry about that. But like an extraction shooter, like, sure.
I'm very excited by it. I think the trailer looks pretty sick, but I totally understand what you're saying. Like, if this is your big bet, and also the release date got pushed, I believe, and it's not coming for a while. And I don't think that like if the last shape doesn't hit, like what does that mean for Bungie? What does that mean for Destiny? Right? Like, it's hard to say. I don't know if things are so good of shape, right? Where if you're Bungie and you're looking around at other Sony owned studios, and if Last of Us or Naughty Dog is getting layoffs and Insomniac is getting layoffs, and then you have The Last Shape, which is kind of supposed to be this kind of Hail Mary moment. I'm not really sure what the reception is of like the anticipation is for The Last Shape right now, but man, I would be just so nervous if I was working on that and trying to get it out the door.
Yeah, and I mean, it does help that in the extraction shooter space, like one of the leaders, one of the progenitors, Escape from Tarkov, is available, but it's not really available per se.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you buy like if you want to play Tarkov, you have to go to the developer site. You have to buy it directly from them. Like it is a very much not easily available thing. So there's space for Marathon to visuals and Bungie and Sony behind them, and then deliver an extraction shooter without like a super clear leader. Like even Payday 3 didn't land all that well. So
Yeah,
there's space. I just don't know if that's the right play.
sure. It certainly looks interesting, and like you're saying, by the time we get there, right? I feel like extraction shooters kind of took off, but didn't take off in the way that like battle royale games did. And I think that was the anticipation that extraction shooters would like. Tarkov is huge for sure, and there's other extraction shooters that are huge, and there's a lot of other developers emulating that stuff. But I don't think it's going to permeate, and it hasn't, right? And when they greenlit Marathon, that wasn't the case. It seemed like extraction shooters were going to be the next big thing. And now it feels like we're in this quiet time where we don't actually know what the next big thing is going to be. And I think that's why there's like a lot of uneasiness around games as service, and microtransactions, but shooters in general when you have those big dogs out there like Fortnite and Call of Duty for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, technically, like Helldivers is an extraction game. There's also Deep Rock Galactic, which is an
That's
extraction
true.
game.
Yes.
But those are PvE extraction. I can see those being a little bit funner. Dark and Darker is another one like Tarkov, except Dark and Darker sort of got kneecapped a little bit.
There's a
But there are
Warhammer one as well, right? I think
Vermintide.
Vermintide. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the same way as Helldivers. Like it's a co-op PvE sort of thing.
Hmm.
There is no Hunt Showdown is sort of split the difference. There is PvE, but there's also other players trying to complete the same things.
Yeah.
So like there's space. I just don't think this is going to be a huge thing.
Hmm.
And tying it with the marathon gives them a lot of visual freedom, but like part of me is like, one, is the space that big, and two, couldn't you just calling it Destiny Extraction probably would have done better, maybe, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Um,
and and tying it to the existing like cosmetics or whatever that players already have with Destiny or something like that. I
mhm.
don't know. But overall, I think Sony has the right idea. Like the one thing that I would say, and you brought up the PlayStation 6. Before we even get to the PlayStation 6, there is a PS5 Pro coming, and it has been
Oh right. Yeah.
rumored
Gotcha.
at this point. Sony has not officially said anything, but Digital Foundry talked about it, so it might as well exist. Like Digital Foundry,
We have that.
knowing about it means like it is pretty much a done deal.
Yeah, so there's a spec. They kind of pulled down what the specs kind of leaked, and then Digital Foundry said, let's see if there's I'm just gonna do a quick search here for uh let's see, let me see. They don't adjust the so this is on Eurogamer, right? Their sister site with Digital Foundry, or owned Eurogamer owns Digital Foundry basically. And this headline is Spec Analysis: PlayStation 5 Pro, the most powerful console yet, a bigger, faster GPU with improved RT. Ray tracing and AI upscaling, but what should we expect from its games? This is published by Richard Ledbetter, who kind of runs Digital Foundry, alongside Alex Battaglia and John. I'm forgetting John's last name. I'm sorry, John. I know it. I just can't think of it right now. Anyways, they did do like kind of a spec teardown, but let's see. Insider Gaming's Tom Henderson has a spotless record in revealing new PlayStation hardware. So this is where the leaks came from. Tom Henderson used to be kind of a leaker primarily on Twitter, and started his own website called Insider Gaming, and has been the most up to date on PlayStation leaks. He called the PlayStation Portal. He called that out. He's been championing, or not championing, but has been talking about the PlayStation 5 Pro for a long time, like as late as like a year and a half ago, and has kind of had his head wrapped around like PlayStation hardware. So and he's been spot on with all that stuff. So this is kind of where this stuff comes from. And so here's the specs. Let
and
me get in
and
there.
spec wise, like CPU is pretty much the same. Um, yeah, with a little bit of overclocking. GPU, you get is stronger. It looks to be an RDNA 3
Mm.
architecture as opposed to RDNA 2 for the previous system. And you get a slight increase in memory bandwidth, and that stuff is fine. It'll give you some extra frames, but the real meat is in the same spots that it has been recently for PC. So you're going to see big improvements for hardware-enabled ray tracing. They say later in that article, like 2 to 4 times in terms of ray tracing processing. And then the real juicy one is the NVIDIA DLSS, or AMD FSR upscaler called PlayStation Spectral Resolution. And same deal. It's just supposed to the system is essentially generating extra resolution, or in DLSS case, they can also do frame generation, which improves frame rates by sort of faking extra frames. And DLSS, since they really got it going, FSR not as much, but DLSS 2 and 3 have been great on
Yeah,
PCs.
they've been really good, but I think there's also kind of a question of like how much do you think these developers are going to want to mess with ray tracing on console, which, does the PlayStation 5 Pro unlock that, do you think? And then I think the reason we're bringing this up is because the big question is like, what's the future for PlayStation? And this is the immediate future for PlayStation. They're going to release this new like hardware half step. And does that solve the problem of like, of not dovetailing, but kind of slowed PlayStation sales? And I think, yes, you might get an uptick, but yeah, do you think that like this PlayStation Spectral super resolution and like DLSS tech basically are gonna like move the needle, especially without any major games that we know of at this point?
I mean, so they've said that there's going to be a PS5 Pro enabled label on certain games. But again, like I started at the very beginning, I'm just not like folks don't have the money. Like we've just gotten to the point that the PlayStation 5 is something that a larger number of players can pick up if they have the money.
Mm-hmm.
And then we haven't really lowered the price of that system yet, and maybe it will with the advent of the Pro. But
Mm-hmm.
the Pro itself, I just don't necessarily see it being a huge driver for console sales. And the uptick technology is very cool. The PSSR, I think, will be great and enhance ray tracing. And, you get, maybe you got a 30 FPS game, you get it to 60. That's cool. But I look at those more as bellwethers for the future,
Mm-hmm.
like where PlayStation 6 is going, as opposed to a PS5 Pro being a system that I feel like makes a ton of sense in the market right now.
Yeah, it is kind of a baffling decision, but at the same time, I don't know if they knew they were going to be in this situation where they weren't going to have any major releases this year. It doesn't seem like something you would plan for, or major sequels. Sorry, the wording on that is really important. The context is important.
Yes, the the
Yeah.
the exact wording is they will not have any new releases in any major franchises. So there could be more, say, Helldivers, or maybe something from Housemark or from a smaller studio.
And the third
But
party partnerships as well,
and
like
the third
timed
party
exclusives.
partnerships,
Yeah.
yeah, like the Rise of the Ronins, the Stellar Blades,
Your Final Fantasy
um,
7 Rebirth? What are we
Rebirth,
on?
yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no God of War, there's no um, Spider Man,
No
there's no
Horizon. Yeah.
Horizon, there's no Ghost of Tsushima. Theoretically, I really feel like Ghost of Tsushima 2 should probably be ready sometime soon.
It's in the
So
oven, right? Like, it's there. It's like, it's got to be close. Yeah, I was doing the same thing the other day. Like, how are we not talking about this yet?
I figure we'll probably Ghost of Tsushima 2 will appear at sorry, it's not even E3. Summer
Summer
Game
Game Fest.
yeah, Summer Game Fest. And then we'll get it second quarter of next year. So that'll be their kickoff for that year. But it's very odd to me that they are not launching the Pro with a ringer.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are not ready to launch it with one of their ringers. Um, that just feels weird.
Yeah,
Um,
that definitely definitely doesn't feel good. Uh, and did the place? I can't remember if the PS4 Pro had anything in particular, but I can't imagine that there's that many people with PlayStation 5s that haven't already gotten the big like first party exclusives, right? If you have a PS5, you probably already have God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2. Like you've probably already played those games. And so maybe they time those with DLC, right? Like we know from the Insomniac leak, there's a Venom DLC on the way. and they hadn't really talked much about that. I forget if if the date is later, but like that would be ideal for something like the Pro. And we haven't heard from Sony. And given their track record, we usually don't hear from them until midsummer or September. And there was a 1 year where they just skipped a big showcase almost altogether. I feel like they like pushed it into the next year almost, I want to say. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I
Like
guess
the 4 Pro launched, I want to say like right around it was probably Final Fantasy 15 and Watch Dogs 2 were probably the biggest.
mm,
Um, and maybe, just some extra juice from Horizon Zero Dawn and Gran Turismo, whatever the Gran Turismo was at the time.
mm,
But yeah, it's just like if you don't have a thing, like a hammer to throw down, like I don't it's interesting to see what the future might look like, but I just don't see it to be a huge driver. And if it's coming this year, I mean, Sony already said, yeah, we expect over the course of this financial year for PS5 unit sales to go down. So even if it's coming this year, they don't expect it to do a lot.
yeah, I think we've kind of talked around pretty much everything, and yeah, I think I agree with you that it's not having some kind of killer app, I guess is the way we used to say it. I don't know, or just a good launch title to go with your new hardware seems like a misstep. I'm sure they will have something or some kind of big initiative or repackaging of games that already exist, and we just haven't heard it yet, and we probably won't hear it till summertime. Do you think
Oh
that
yeah,
sounds
I mean
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
that's gonna happen. Like
yeah,
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will have improved performance mode. Call of Duty Warzone will look better. Some stuff, but again, like we're already sort of outside the realm of how much money folks have, and what's more exciting, a PS5 Pro or a new Switch? Which, Switch 2 will probably be like early 2025 or something like that.
yeah. So there's like, we know that there's going to be a PlayStation 6. Those rumors are out there. Obviously, it's going to happen. But there's also been a lot of rumors about handhelds as well, which has been wild to me. Like Microsoft getting into the handheld game, PlayStation getting into the handheld game. This is Insider Gaming again, Tom Henderson's kind of site that he founded. This one was written by Mike Straw. But like, yeah, you can go check out this article, and it's got like, oh, I guess this came from Moore's Law is Dead, who's like a YouTuber who
Yeah,
drops a ton of
Moore's Law
links.
is Dead is a chip leaker you guy.
Experts.
Like
Yeah,
he knows a lot of
yeah,
stuff about Nvidia and AMD and what they're planning for future stuff. So he has also been one of the people that has been sounding the call for a PS5 Pro. Just like,
yes.
hey, this is a thing that is coming.
Yep, and he said it's currently in the high level design phase and is at least 2 years out and technically not greenlit for launch yet. So I mean, even this smaller device, like we got the Portal, you've got the PSVR 2, which is basically, I want to say it's dead. I know I have VR friends who would be upset with me for saying that, but like, I don't know. You look at support for like those kind of side projects from PlayStation in the hardware space not getting support. Obviously, PS5 Pro is going to be a little bit different in that it's an extension of the larger PlayStation 5 like device and brand. So it's going to get the support that like probably Portal and PSVR 2 don't. But I don't know. It's like hard to imagine spending money on a PSVR 2 or something like that and just being like seeing no support and then hearing PS5 Pro is coming and it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of support for it yet. Like maybe that's a good investment eventually. But again, back to your other point, like I don't think they're going to drop prices on anything because if PlayStation 6 is also coming in the next few years, if they drop the price, then they can't go up much further from there for the new stuff. Which is something I heard Jeff Grubb talking about on Game S Mornings the other day as well, where he kind of outlined that as like, PlayStation 5 Pro comes out, maybe it's like 550 or it's going to be a $600 box. Then you can keep your current console at its 500 price, right? And then for PlayStation 6, you can go up from there. They're not going to want to go down, right? It only, it's got to be new and shiny and it's got to be worth the value, the perceived value that players are going to put into it. So like, I could see that too. And I don't know. We should probably wrap up because we've been going for a while. I guess we'll end with this question. Like, what do you think the future of PlayStation holds like in the next few years?
The next 2 years?
Well, maybe like few. I don't know. Because I think the immediate future, we know there's not a lot of games and there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, I don't think there's much to speculate on for this year because we just don't know. Something weird is going on, right? Like, I don't know how to speculate on it with so little information.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're getting another Spider-Man mid-grade, Ghost of Tsushima 2. Um, Probably not another Horizon. Maybe Sony Santa Monica's game, which I believe is supposed to be a sci-fi game this time around.
But do you think
Sony?
that Naughty Dog game? You're not saying that's out this year, right? That's like eventually down the line, yeah.
That's down the line, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah. Um, Sony bins whatever game that they have.
Yeah.
The new thing.
Those are two things I think could happen this year. Like, but it doesn't seem like it based on like the reporting that like Sony Bend was on a bunch of projects and then they got shuffled up. They were working with Naughty Dog on a Last of Us thing. Then that got moved over. Then they had started like one or two other projects from what I remember. And that kind of like didn't go right. So for Sony Bend, they could have some kind of surprise announcement this year. I think Ghost of Tsushima 2 could be a surprise announcement for this year. It's got to be close to being done, like we said. But like outside,
I think it might be announced and revealed. I think they are honest about saying that there's not going to be a major release.
Yeah.
So I think we'll see it, but it'll be like now
next year,
2025.
Yeah, like this time next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Sorry, yeah, because Ghost of Tsushima 2 would be a sequel to a major franchise, so we know that's out. But yeah, like this is basically the list for the Ford. I mean, there's a lot of doom and gloom when people talk about the future of consoles. Like, I don't personally think consoles are going anywhere. We're fine on that. Like, Xbox has already confirmed they're working on something big, shiny, and new for the next console generation. You can sure bet that there's a PlayStation 6 coming eventually, in the next few years. But it looks like Sony's just going to have a down year, right? Like, I don't know any other way around it, man.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a down year, but I think it'll be fine. I it's not like Microsoft is going to throw any haymakers, and it's also not like it's not like Nintendo is, right? Like, you're not going to get another Zelda. Maybe you get Metroid Prime. But they're gonna save the next actual Mario for a Switch. And they're going to, save the good stuff for the Switch too.
Yeah.
And Microsoft has some stuff, but nothing that's really gonna like, they got Avowed and some other stuff, but nothing that's gonna like tear the walls off and destroy everything. So it's just going to be a down year. Use that time to seek out some smaller games or to jump into your backlog. I think it'll be fine for Sony, and I think Sony is feeling fine because they're looking at everyone else and going, "Oh, I mean, they don't have anything really either."
It's like they collectively agreed, like, "Oh no, we're just gonna dodge it," because they know about like you're saying, like, people just can't afford new consoles right now. They are paying attention to that, to the market widely like that, and to their demographics and their audience widely like that, for sure. Like, yes, Nintendo's gonna wait, like you said, for Switch 2 next year. Then things are gonna pick up. So like, yeah, there's also doom and gloom about the industry in general, which I don't particularly subscribe to. Like, we're just gonna have a down one. Like, we're in an ebb and flow kind of period here where like things do gangbusters and then it's got to stop at some point, and line graphs are going to go down.
And I mean, like, there's no really reason. Like, there are people that are going to be out of work, and there are going to be lulls, and on a personal level, I can see the hurt.
Yeah.
But all told, in the industry, like, the stuff that hits has either come from nowhere or come from like real veteran teams that have been slowly working their way up over time. Like recent hits are like Helldivers. You got Baldur's Gate 3, which is Larian slowly working their way up, and they say, oh, we're going to do something else. Elden Ring, Tekken 8.
You had Pal
You
World this
got,
year too, right?
you had Paul Ward came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it's been. It's been either a developer just slowly working the midnight oil for years, and they've just, I call it sins of the father. Like your game does better based on what your last game did,
Sure.
and and like they've just been slowly working their way up. Path of Exile 2 is probably going to hit at some point. And that's it. It's small or big. and and even the big are like mid-range like hits.
Sure.
Not the stuff that's multi-millions of dollars. Bellatra is another good one. Like
Yeah,
that
sure.
did very well.
Yeah, that is a good one.
Lies of P. I'm not feeling particularly intrigued by Stellar Blade, but hey, that could do well. Rise of the Ronin sales might have done okay.
Yeah.
So the successes are coming from every range of the industry, and there will always be veterans that can hit like from smaller studios, new studios. Mike Laidlaw just announced a new game today.
Oh, really?
I forget what the title of it is, but yeah, he just announced a new like single player game earlier today.
Eternal Strands. Oh yeah, that's
That's
all
it.
the headlines for this. Yeah. Eternal
So,
Strands is that game.
and will that do well? I don't know, but it has a chance to do as well as anything else, and especially there's always space for, like I was saying, Marvel Rivals might take off because Overwatch 2 is struggling.
I think it'll
There's
have to be
space.
really good to do that, but yeah, it could.
Yeah, there's like one of the old Assassin's Creed guys is doing another game that sounds like Assassin's Creed again, which is fine. Like this is what it is. This is the industry. We just like movies and everything else. We need to back away from the top of the line, like 100, 200, 300 million dollar games, and just try some stuff out and see what works.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I'd love to see like $100 million games or like $50 million games or like games that are just like 4 to 10 hours long, instead of the 30 to 40. Like play in that space, and also with like a lot less bangers this year, those huge games. There's going to be room for what you're saying to happen. There's going to be room for games or game makers you haven't heard of coming up, showing their new stuff, and for stuff to take off in that way because people's time isn't going to be sucked up in that way.
yeah, and you don't
Yeah.
you don't need my whole life. I finished Spider-Man 2 in like 25, 30 hours.
Oh wow.
Like all told, like everything is done. And I don't need to go back to it. It's good. We're
Sure.
good. Whenever you want to release a DLC, you can do that months down the line. But it's fine. I paid $70 for a good 30 hours of game. That's it.
Yeah.
Isn't that good? Isn't that good for you guys?
Isn't that good enough, right? You don't need to, could you imagine if all those suits in Spider-Man would cost like $1, $2? But that's not what skins go for these days. They go for like $20 in the Overwatch store.
Yeah,
right
they
now.
go. Fortnite
Like,
and
gosh.
Warzone and Overwatch are like $10, $15 skins. And I've spent so much money on Fortnite. Oh God.
Yeah, yeah, gosh, I keep buying battle passes in Marvel Snap as well. Like, they're gonna get your money, but it would be nice to see games kind of stand on their own merits without the kind of hooks that are encouraging you to spend money, or like even hooks that are like I don't want to say that are like encouraging you to be like addictive or something, being addicted to certain game like type loops, like you have Balatro, which is like a one-time purchase, right? Which is a very addictive gaming experience, but it offers value in that sense. But like not every game has to be that, right? Not every game has to be a multiplayer game with this kind of microtransaction hooks. The one thing I did want to bring up before we close is that Xbox did announce 5 games or has confirmed 5 games for this year. They have apparently 5 more, according to Matt Booty, who talked during that Xbox Developer Direct. But like you said, Avowed, you got Hellblade 2 this year, Indiana Jones, Visions of Mana, which is third party, and then Ara, which is like the Civ-like game. But I don't think that game's taken over the world. But yeah, there are games this year, is all I mean. Like, and the always the most exciting thing whenever somebody would ask me about going into summer game news or like E3 type stuff. The thing that excites me the most about this industry are the things that I don't know yet. Like the things that are going to surprise me, because that's always the kind of best feeling of like, look what this person did, or look at this new game like that I wouldn't have thought I'd be interested in. And now
Speaking of, what game is that's playing right now?
that is the new Mike Laidlaw game. That is
No,
Eternal Strands, I believe.
no. The one in the video right now is not.
Oh, it's not? What is this? I would just assume because this is IGN and then it's on here.
Yeah, no, that
Is
looks
this
interesting.
Trine? It looks like Trine, but hold on, let's see. Are you sure this isn't it?
I'm absolutely positive.
Let's see.
No Rest for the Wicked. No,
It
that
says
looks
IGN
good.
first. Oh yeah, there we go. It must have autoplayed
It
the next.
yeah, it autoplayed to the next thing. Yeah.
There you go. Never heard of this game. IGN first has got you locked in. No Rest for the Wicked.
And that is how things go. Like sometimes, this is why I love PAX, even though I miss PAX. Sometimes you'll just see something and you're like, "Oh, that looks cool.
Yeah,
I need to know more about this."
yeah, this does look cool. Oh man. All right. Well, we better end the show so I can go read about this game. Mike, thanks for hanging out. Let's call it. Where can the people find you? Where can they find your work? What are you up to these days?
You can find me on the Blue Sky at mhwilliams.bsky.social. I will change that one day to my actual. I own like 7 different domains. I'll change it to one of them. But yeah, that's where I do most of my stuff. And then you can find me on here on Context Clubs. You can also find me occasionally, not every episode, but every other episode or every other 2 episodes on 3 Moves Ahead, which is a strategy game podcast.
Fantastic podcast.
I was just on the last episode reviewing where we talked about Paradox published Civ Killer Millennia. That is not that great. So
if you want to hear Mike dunk on that game, go listen to 3 Moves Ahead. Very good show. Anywhere else?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, you can find me as always here on this YouTube channel, which will probably also get renamed at some point. It's just my name. It doesn't seem super accurate, but we're kind of still figuring stuff out as life goes on. But you can find me on Twitter also at Darth Burrito. The O is a 0. Same thing on Blue Sky. And in the meantime, just keep watching, keep leaving comments. We really appreciate it. Any feedback you give us, about the show or about maybe topics you'd like to hear us talk about. We're checking out the comments all the time. So, these ones get a few, and some of my other videos get a lot of comments. So just hit me up in there. I'll probably see it. I don't know. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And we'll see you next week, I think.
So, like Cyclops, we were talking about X-Men. Cyclops has a power that he can see, like, perfect angles. That would be on the stat sheet. Like they can see the business angles.
What about, like, lying?
And lying, that's part of charisma.
Okay.
And the ability to see other people's stats.